Like and subscribe and click the bell icon to get new video updates.
Rose de Freycinet stowed away on her husband's ship 200 years ago. Here's why her journey still matters more than 200 years ago. A 22-year-old French woman cut off her hair, disguised herself as a man, stowed away on a ship, and became the first woman to document a circumnavigation of the world. But her story was almost lost to the world, thanks to male editors and censorship. And it might have stayed hidden forever, were it not for a modern push to bring women's perspectives to the fore. Read more. Professor Claire Wright, a La Trobe University professor of history and author, says there are many invisible women of history, and that going back to the archives with a sense of curiosity could help uncover previously unheard perspectives. And writing women back into history is about setting the record straight. Women were there, they were history makers, they participated in events, they agitated, they invented, they explored, they colonized, they resisted colonization. Basically any historical activity you want to document, women were there doing the same thing. The stowaway. It was 1817 when Rose de Freycinet, disguised as a man, boarded her French naval husband's ship, the Uranie, and hid in a special cabin he had prepared for her. Her husband, Louis de Freycinet, the namesake of the picturesque Freycinet Peninsula on the east coast of Tasmania, had become the first person to map Australia's coastline as a sub-lieutenant of French naturalist Nicolas Bourdon. 6 years later, the French government awarded Louis his own scientific expedition to return to the South Seas, but this time he was newly married and in love. His was a small wooden ship with 120 men on board, and having a woman embark was strictly illegal. So he pretended he needed an extra officer's cabin and made a few refurbishments. What he was doing was secretly supplying a place where Rose could have some privacy. Author and historian Suzanne Falkiner tells ABC RN's Late Night Live. Making her invisible. Being invisible on board the Uranie was critical not only for Rose's safety, but also Louis' reputation. Rose had to stay hidden until they were out of territorial waters, and then there was some danger that when they landed in French territory, the officials there would arrest her. Miss Falkiner, the author of Rose, The Extraordinary Journey of Rose de Freycinet, says. But rumors about her presence aboard the ship spread through France, and even reached the royal court. The king said something like, well, perhaps the less said, the better, Miss Falkiner says. Rose's embarkation remained a secret on the Uranie until Louis invited his officers to tea and told them she was on board. Miss Falkiner says the officers' reactions were mixed, but that some weren't happy. Women were thought to bring bad luck to ships, and the Uranie's navigator Gabriel Lafond, who wrote about the voyage more than 2 decades later, says she was an apple of discord among the crew and officers. So, while she spent 2.5 years on board the Uranie, Rose rarely appeared on deck. Instead, she kept to her cabin, teaching herself to play guitar, learning English and doing needlework. She was also an intellectual companion for Louis and supported him by researching the places they were destined to visit. Rose's presence was largely unacknowledged by those on board. Everybody had to pretend that Rose wasn't there, because officially she wasn't there, Miss Falkiner says. This included the ship's artists Jacques Arago and Alphonse Pellion, who were tasked with visually documenting the expedition. Quite often they did 2 versions of paintings, a private version where Rose was visible and then another one, which was censored. There are actual drafts where there is a line drawn through the figure of Rose, so the engraver could leave her out. Not the full story. Although she was cut from the official records of the expedition, Rose kept a journal documenting the voyage. The journals were addressed to her friend Caroline de Nantoul back in France. Miss Falkiner says there is a lightheartedness in many of Rose's observations. They included banter about foreign fashion, social norms and the various dignitaries she encountered along the way. The original handwritten version gives a woman's perspective of a time dominated by male voices. But Ms. Falkiner says the published version doesn't tell the full story. They, The journal entries passed through the hands of several male editors who cut out things they thought might be a bit disreputable. For example, names of prominent figures were redacted, while other indiscreet observations of dignitaries were toned down, including those of the French consul in Tenerife and Baron de Richemont and his wife on Ile Bourbon. Specific details about Louis' poor health and inability to work for portions of the trip, including his nervous colic and treatment with opium, were also not published.